So let's say that you were at home and you were cooking dinner or cooking some kind of a meal, so you were busy, right? And your partner came home and he had like this crazy good news and he wanted to share it with you, but you were in the middle of cooking this meal. Like, how might you respond to his news?
In my mind as this was playing out, because I'm picturing myself in the kitchen doing this thing. I pictured it all like unfolding like a movie.
Welcome to Spotlight on Secure, a place where we have candid conversations with securely attached people about their relationships. A place where you can learn what secure attachment is like in a relationship and learn ideas for how to make your own relationships more secure, with more safety, trust, and commitment, yet still fun and passionate. I'm Kaylee Larkin, a love and attachment coach, and I'm here today with Tatiana Rodriguez, an adjunct professor of public speaking who brings her own secure relating style into the classroom with amazing communication strategies and resources for adjunct professors. But today we'll be talking about personal relationships. You know, sometimes when you're having these conversations, you can dive really deep and there's just so much still that you want to talk about. And so we are back with Tatiana and she has more amazing details to share with us about what it's like being in a secure relationship. So, Tatiana, so good to have you here again. One of the things that people wonder a lot about in relationships and they ask me about is when we're with a partner, where do we seek our primary support? Do we seek it from our primary partner? Do we seek it from other people? Is it possible to lean too much on a partner? And so I'm just kind of curious for yourself, where do you seek support in your relationship? And who do you lean on or talk to or get support with outside of your relationship?
This is a really important concept to think about, Kaylee. And for myself, I feel blessed enough to have many options, people that I have a strong support system with. Both of my parents are still alive, so I'm able to reach out to them. We have a good relationship. And also, my two closest friends that I've been friends with since college are still an active part of my life, and I know I can turn to them for things. I also believe that counseling is a really important part of our emotional journey. And so, many times throughout my life, I've sought the guidance and the help of a counselor. So, that's another area of support. Also, in my faith, in my faith journey, that is a strong source of support system as well. But in terms of an individual person, I will say that my partner is my primary source of support, but he's not my only source of support. And there are times when I need to process and unpack things that relate to our relationship where the processing shouldn't happen with him. There are many times when it does, but I think that there are times when I need to take the processing part out of it. And even for him as well. For example, if he's processing some things from his past, I may not be the right person to process that with. We all should have a space where we can process unfiltered.
Yes.
And in that case, I'm not the right person. I'm the right person to hear it filtered
Yeah.
versus unfiltered, and vice versa for him too. I Even though the truth is the truth and the situation is the situation, if I'm speaking about things of the past, there are just details and pieces of information that are not necessary for my partner to hear that I might process a little bit differently with a friend. So I think just being sensitive to the dynamics and also the situation. I feel it's like, who's the best person for the job? Who's got the right skills and the right mindset and the time even. For example, if I know that my friend, it's a very busy time, even if I really want to talk to her, okay, she might not be the best person right now because she's just not available. She's got a ton
Right.
of other stuff going on.
Yeah.
But where else can I go to for my support? So I'm terrible at investing, but it's like that concept of investing where you spread your investments across. I feel like it's great to be able to have strong support systems in various areas to help you at different times and with different needs. So it's a very long way of saying diversifying that support doesn't overburden any one person and helps you have options. And I just want to reiterate the importance of seeking a counselor, a therapist, or a licensed clinical social worker, someone a psychologist who can help you process these things when you need to in your life. And we have a lot of online options today, which is great too.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, such a great message for folks out there with anxious attachment style who might be tempted to lean only on their partner, or for other folks who might think that it's not okay to lean on the partner too much. Like it's great to diversify, as Tatiana is saying, and to get sources of support in multiple places and seek, appropriate help and guidance and expertise when that's needed. So I
And
love that.
as I'm saying that out loud, Kaylee, too, I'm thinking that's an area where people will seek out coaching in their relationship as well with someone
Sure.
like you. So that's another area. Like I would put you in that same category.
Right.
It is it is guiding and helping people navigate relationships.
Sure. Yeah. And sometimes we need that additional outside perspective. All of us are, figuring this out and we can't always solve everything all on our own. And that's part of secure attachment is leaning into the areas where other people can support us and we can support them. It's that interdependence. We don't have to be totally independent, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps in everything, that we can lean on each other as needed. It's that beautiful kind of community feel to life. So one of the things that secure couples often do for each other is kind of support each other, not just in times when things are, difficult, but also to celebrate and to, appreciate what's going well, to really recognize what's going well for each other. So let's say that you were at home and you were cooking dinner or cooking some kind of a meal, so you're busy, right? And your partner came home and he had like this crazy good news and he wanted to share it with you, but you were in the middle of cooking this meal. Like, how might you respond to his news?
In my mind, as this was playing out, because I'm picturing myself in the kitchen doing this thing, I pictured it all like unfolding like a movie.
Yeah,
And I was thinking, oh, I put the knife down and I gave him a big hug and was like, that's
yeah,
so exciting. And then and I'm
yes,
also like, what, I wonder what the good news is.
yes. Love it. Yeah, so you really just stopped what you're doing and took a moment to appreciate that with him.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so because sometimes when people are in the middle of something, they're like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of that. Let's just like hang on to that thought for a second. Let me just finish cooking and then we'll talk about it later." But of course, if we do that, then we're not really taking a moment to celebrate it. And by the time, we actually get around to talking about it, they've kind of lost some of that natural excitement. They didn't get to share with you in the
And
moment. So I
I
love that you
will
just stopped and hugged them. Yeah,
I will admit that it's because I was cooking. It's an activity that can be started and stopped at any time.
sure.
Certainly there have been times where my partner has wanted to talk or share something, but I'm 5 minutes away. So, and it's difficult when you work from home a lot too, because you're not out of the house, out of the office. And sometimes people don't realize you're still in work mode, work time, trying to get something done.
Yes.
So I do find it difficult when it's a bit unexpected. Obviously, if it's something critical, then I will stop anything that I'm doing. It doesn't matter if I was in the middle of a live stream, right? If there was an
Yeah.
important thing,
Yeah.
then I would need to switch gears.
Yep.
But I am human, and I do find it difficult sometimes when I'm 5 minutes away from completing something that I've been working so hard on, and the conversation is about something slightly less critical in the scale that I feel can wait. So I just want to
Yes.
admit that I certainly don't always enjoy the what I consider like a disruption to the workflow of the day. But in something like that where it's more relaxed, I think that it is much more emotionally available to me to be like, wow, that's great or that's awesome. But
Yes.
I do know what you mean about that point where you'll say, can you just give me 5 minutes? Like I'm almost done.
Yes. And there's a difference between what you're saying of like something that can wait, something that's not, really big news. Like in the case of someone saying, "Oh my gosh, I have this really big news. Like I want to share this with you," and they're excited versus like, "Oh, hey, guess what happened?" And you're like 5 minutes away from completing your goal. Like sometimes we have to have the boundaries just in order to stay in the workflow, and at the same time just being like, okay, just give me 5 seconds, I'll be right there with you, I'm really curious, just give me 5 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever it is. Yeah, there's
Right.
like that balance, and we have to have boundaries for ourselves, of course, too. But yeah,
Yes.
so just recognizing that even though sometimes work stuff comes up, can't avoid it, we can also just do our best to be there to celebrate with our partners when there's something that's worth celebrating. so
for
that they
sure.
feel loved and supported and that you're there with them.
And that's also a lot of joy for me. Like experiencing joy in his life, in something going on with him, also feels joyful to me. You know, it's so
Yes.
it's that shared joy.
Yes, exactly. That shared joy. It's part of being in partnership together is like getting to celebrate the good stuff together. Yeah. One thing that people do often struggle with in kind of insecure relationships is comings and goings. That can be hard for people. So, for example, if one person's, leaving and the other person's feeling old wounds come up around abandonment, or other people struggle with someone getting close to them and feeling suffocated. And so sometimes people will have rituals or they'll have things that they do when people come and go. It might be just going off to work or it might be, going on a trip or so I'm just kind of curious what you both do in your relationship. Are there any rituals? Are there any things that you like to do? Say if one of you comes home or just in general, are there any things that you like to do to greet each other or to, say goodbye temporarily?
I think there's always the element of embraces, hugs and kisses and I love yous would
Yes.
be the traditional typical hug, kiss, I love you expression is certainly something that we do routinely. And every now and again there will be time when somebody forgets or and then you feel like you miss it. So we could say like, "Hey, where's my goodbye hug?" or Where's my hello hug?" Little things like that. So
Yeah.
those are things to just remind each other of. But fortunately for us, it's something that we both want. I
Yes.
think it can also be difficult when, like, for example, I have a high need for physical closeness and embracing and physical touch.
Mhm.
And if I was in a relationship with someone where physical touch is like the bottom of their love language list, that I can see how that's challenging for couples. I can see how those differences really are difficult. And then it really becomes about each partner trying to meet each other's needs a little bit more in real, like and I have a family member that I'm very close with who does not give a lot of physical touch expressions, and I find myself wanting them from her.
Yeah.
But I have to understand that I'm never going to get what I want from her, and then hopefully she can understand that sometimes she has to go a little out of her way to just give me an embrace, because it's something that is important to me, at least when we first see each other or something. So
Yes.
I think it's about understanding each other's differences too when they're not a match.
Beautiful. Yeah, because we all have those different love languages, and some people are going to prefer, to express or receive love as physical touch. Some people are going to prefer to express or receive love as, words of affirmation. And Tatiana, you're making a really amazing point that one person might not be receiving quite as much as they want in that love language. And they have to, come to terms with that a little bit, right? Like just recognize, okay, I might not receive quite as much as I want from this particular person in this particular love language. And the other person on their end, they can, perhaps learn to recognize that they can boost up what they're giving. And so there's this kind of natural balancing of one person having realistic expectations, that we don't always receive things exactly the way that we want them to be, but we can find ways to meet those needs in other ways. Like perhaps your partner is really great at meeting that need, or perhaps you have other ways of meeting that need. And on the other hand, this other person can do their work to make it even better. So, on both sides that people can make contributions on both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. You also have to recognize in the book, the one of the concepts they talk about with love languages is your bucket being filled. And I think it's important to
Mm-hmm.
recognize when your bucket is empty, either in the relationship or in general. So, for example, all right, so I'm not going to get embraced from that one person I mentioned in my family, but I know when I see this person, I'm going to get a lot of it. So just
Yes.
keeping those things in mind and being aware of when your levels are shrinking, like I need hugs, like
Yes.
knowing being aware of it and then being able to ask for it and seeking it out. It's almost like three different steps to having your needs met.
Yes. I like to call this love hydration. It's like giving
Mm.
ourselves the love that we may not be able to necessarily receive as or feel as much as we want to. So being able to take in love from different places, whether that's internal or external, and then really be able to feel that on a kind of somatic body level so that we can fill our
Yes.
own cup and feel that love for ourselves, even if we're not receiving as much as we want to. Maybe we're not dating anyone or in a relationship with someone, but we can still find love out in the world and feel that. And that's very empowering for people to know that you have control over your feelings and, how you feel, your happiness and feelings of love and security.
Absolutely. I mean, I was alone for over a decade, without
Yeah,
a romantic partnership. Thankfully, I had a lot of rich relationships with my nieces, the kids in my family, and that met a lot of my need for physical closeness. Because kids, you generally think that they are a little more expressive. The nearness is a little more important to them. So that was one way in my life that I felt like I was still getting some of that physical touch, even though I was not getting it in a partnership way.
yes, it's a good message to folks who are not currently dating, but you can still get needs met in other ways. Absolutely. So, even the best relationships sometimes have conflict, though. Like things can be going really well, but every once in a while there's going to be something, right? And they say the goal isn't to have a relationship with zero conflict. The goal is to have a relationship where we realistically, things come up and then we manage them and we repair. So I'm just kind of curious for yourself, how do you handle conflict in your relationship so people feel validated and seen and heard, respected, cared about, all that kind of stuff?
No, I just want to highlight, score, underline that the goal is not no conflict. I
Yes.
know many people are not comfortable with it, and for good reason. Like, conflict has this like stickiness to it.
Yeah.
It's just gross feeling for a lot of us, but it's like I tell my students in my leadership classes, my public speaking class, we talk about team dynamics. No team of human beings will ever be conflict free. It's just not possible.
Right.
If you want a high performing team, it means that the people in that team know how to handle conflict when it happens, not if it happens, when it happens.
Yeah.
And I think that same approach applies in our romantic relationships. It's not a question of if, but a question of when, and how you handle the conflict that really matters. In my relationship, which again is the best relationship I've ever experienced, it's the strongest, it's the most secure, it's the most loving, it's the most freeing. I'm the most accepted, I'm the most myself, and we still have problems. We still have conflicts, including one in between our last conversation. So this is like fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
And so much of it is about understanding the person that you're in the conflict with and where they might be coming from. I would say that I am much more sensitive to words than my partner is. I'm much more careful about the words that I say than my partners, even from a thinking about it perspective. Like I spend a little bit more time thinking about what I'm about to say so that I don't come across, and that's a skill I learned. When I was younger, it wasn't as natural to me to wait. I would say, and I realized that's not the approach I want to have. So a little bit more careful about the words, and I'm also much more sensitive to those words.
Yeah.
So understanding, how does the brain of my partner process information?
Mhm.
You might be in a relationship with someone who has ADD or ADHD or some other type of processing in the brain that's different than yours.
Right.
So just understanding that alone can be very helpful. So in my case, I have to understand that his interruptions are rarely ever intentional,
Hmm.
but he does also have to learn to do that a lot less. And that
Yeah.
is a nice balance that we have, and something that he was open and honest with me from the beginning so that I could learn a little bit more about it.
Hmm.
So having that patience for each other, and I think from his end, he sometimes wishes I would just come out and say whatever I'm thinking, even if it's a little bit more direct, but that's just not me. It's that's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
being able to balance those things out in each other's relationship, but the one thing that we always come back to is giving each other the benefit of the doubt, and this concept that, hey, we're on the same team. We're different players on the same team. We're not on opposite teams. So that is a phrase that we say to each other when it feels like we're on opposite ends of it.
Hmm.
And he did say this to me in our most recent discussion, is like, hey, we're on the same team. Even though
Yeah.
we had a difference of opinion of the situation that was happening, which was outside of our relationship. It was a separate matter outside. It wasn't something between he and I, but we felt very differently about a situation. So, one, I have to be able to hear his opinion, even if I completely disagree with it, or even if I partially disagree with it. And likewise for him as well. So, but there's a huge responsibility on my end to make my needs known.
Hmm.
So, for example, I have to remind him, I understand that your brain operates 100 times faster than mine, and that must be really hard to control. But when I can't finish my sentence, I find it very frustrating to continue the conversation.
Hmm.
So let's come up with a way when I feel like I'm being interrupted where I'll say, and it's just become like, I don't do it in a let me finish my sentence kind of way, which
Right.
is what my mind is thinking because I'm getting pissed.
Right.
But
And
I
that would
rather,
activate all of his threat responses, right? If you were to use that tone of voice, sure.
but now it's like, okay, let me finish and then I'd love to hear from you. So it's just, and I've come to accept that our conversations are going to come with these interruptions. But he also knows how to redirect when I say, okay, let me finish. And then he just like actively pauses as well. So I'll
Yeah.
say that's one way that we both adapt to each other in that situation. Or I've learned to, because I also say to him, I feel like I have to talk hyper fast so as to not be interrupted sometimes. But that's not the way I want to do it. He's like, I don't want to rush through everything.
Right.
So I've also learned to give cues of like, but there's something more I want to say about that. So I'm still buying myself some more time, or just giving a cue that I'm not done yet, because believe it or not, these little tiny things are the things that become big. Like,
Yeah.
oh, so what? A little
Sure.
interruption here and there. But then that's that little thing that can become a big thing all of a sudden if you don't address it, and if you don't let it be known that I want to be able to finish my sentence.
Yes, and it can be these little things that cause big blowups for people. And usually it's not, I mean, it isn't, yes, it is frustrating and it can be annoying, right? Because we're all annoying.
In
We
some
all,
ways, yes.
right, in some ways, we all have things that are annoying, right? And it's the nature of being in a committed relationship with someone else that we have entered into agreement that we're going to tolerate their annoyances. And so sometimes it's a matter of finding structures and ways to manage that, whether that's saying, hey, I just have one more thing I'm going to say, or just being cognizant of like how much time we're talking, and kind of being mindful of or tuned to their responses of like, are they tapping their fingers and starting to look agitated?
Right, because
And
Kaylee, like, let's be honest. Like, we all have moments when we get really angry in our
yes,
relationships, right? Like, we're human beings. This is just a part
yes,
of who we are. But I think for my partner and I, ultimately, it really is that we love each other and that we are on the same team, and trying to come to it from
yes,
this place of love. Right. And I know, like the emojis add a fun element to it. But when you're in those moments, like, there is nothing
for
funny
real.
about it. There's
No,
nothing
not
funny
funny.
about it, nothing cute
No,
about it. But
no.
giving each other time, being patient, but no matter what has happened, I do always feel like we're on the same team. And
Yes.
I think that's just the part of the security in the relationship, is knowing that both of us are players on the same team, not opposite teams.
Yes, I love that. I love that teamwork sort of feeling that you're talking about. And how you put it was beautiful in that response that you modeled, where you empathize with him, acknowledging, the neurodiversity, and and then said, here's something that we could do together to collaborate. Here's a thing that we can do together, or suggest a way that we together can solve that. And that is the way out when people are kind of trapped in these cycles of each person is arguing their own position. And when we get into those kind of adversarial, like one person saying this, one person saying that, and people get really, attached to being right, the way out of that is to remember you are on the same team as this
Mm.
other person that you're in a relationship with. You love them, you may live with them, they're your partner. And so you are, it might feel in the moment like your adversaries, but usually what's happening is these are old wounds that are being activated. At some point, you didn't feel listened to, or people didn't believe you, or you weren't taken seriously, or whatever. There's like other stories that may be going on. And so just stopping and remembering, this is my partner, I love them, and we're on the same team. And then just feeling that kind of heart connection, that can be valuable. A lot of it is like finding ways to kind of calm down our nervous system in the moment, because we have our animal brain that gets activated. Everyone's kind of on fight or flight or on edge when we get into those tense places. And so just taking a moment to calm ourselves, check in with our body, remind ourselves everything's okay, we're safe. This is just my partner I'm talking to and not, someone from my past. And then reconnecting, like Tatiana was saying, to that collaborative kind of approach. So valuable. So great, Tatiana. I love this. This is such good
Yeah.
stuff for people.
And and I also want to say that we have to be willing to put that on ourselves too. Like we have to look in the mirror sometimes too and realize, like you said, we're all annoying. So one example from my own personality shortcomings is that I can get a little condescending if I feel like I'm repeating myself. So I'll throw in the remember I said kind of a thing, which I
Yeah.
know is not, it's not helpful. Like, obviously, they don't remember, or we wouldn't be in this situation. There's no need to say, remember when I told you? Remember when I mentioned? Remember how I told you?
Right.
So
We all
I
have these. Yes.
I am working on things myself too to okay, there's no need to throw in the little bit of the snarkiness. You know, maybe maybe a memory is not his greatest strength, like no need to remind him that I've already said this before, because what I have to do is keep in mind what's my end result here. What do I want out of this situation? I want love, I want peace, I want joy, I want great
Yes.
friendship, great
Yes.
connection. I don't want to throw in these little digs that sometimes just I don't, and I previously said I like to think about what I say. These are moments when I'm not thinking about what I say. I'm just annoyed. So
Yeah.
I'm saying, don't you remember when I told you? So
Right.
working on skipping that, because he also feels like he has a voice, because I've also noticed in relationships where one partner doesn't feel like they have a voice, it always ends up terribly in some way. You
Sure.
know, many different ways, and you can all imagine how things might go. Or maybe you've even been in a situation where you had no voice, or your partner didn't have a voice. So
Yeah.
it's important to me to know that he feels like he can also speak to me about things, and he will, and he's made it known that sometimes these little side comments aren't helpful, and I need to hear that as well, and I need to be able to receive that, right? So that I will
Yeah.
say one really good thing about me is being willing to acknowledge the mistakes that I've made and knowing that I make them too, and
Yeah.
that I think makes for a really healthy, strong relationship where both of us can feel like we can tell each other the truth. I don't feel like we have to hide things from each other, right? Different than processing things to get them ready for a conversation with us, like things of the past. Unpacking that might be good to do in a separate space with a separate person. But in general, that we really can truly be honest with each other about the little things, the medium things, and the really big things too. So working on ourselves is a huge part of keeping the relationship healthy.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think you nailed it. It's not that we're not going to make mistakes. We are, because we're all human. It's that we can own the mistakes and come from an undefended place when our partner expresses a complaint around that and how that made them feel. Which, by the way, that was another thing you mentioned earlier that I think I left out when I said what you had mentioned was you empathized with your partner, and then you said how it made you feel, and then you suggested a collaborative way that you could solve the problem together. So being able to be empathetic to our partner, acknowledge how that made them feel, instead of our partner coming forward and saying like, wow, you're being really annoying, for them to say, it made me feel, I felt really small when I heard you use that tone of voice.
Hmm. Right.
And then for us, and that also makes it easier for us not to become defensive, but then we can become, sit in our seat, hang onto our seat, hang onto our feet, not literally, of course, but
Hmm.
we can let ourselves hear their complaints and acknowledge, and say, I'm sorry, if that's like, if there's an action that we did, just own it immediately, because just you owning that, apologizing, immediately lowers all of the tension. It makes everyone feel safe again. It's restoring that safety to the relationship. And so, yeah, just this is such good stuff around helping people to feel validated and safe and loved in relationship. Is, yes, we're going to make mistakes, but it's how we own it. It's how we reconnect again afterwards. So valuable.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And it's a work in progress.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely always a work in progress. So, speaking of works in progress, I know that you've talked a lot about communication and how communication is very important to you, and you have a lot of experience both professionally and personally with communication. And that is a key to a healthy relationship, right? Is really good communication. And sometimes in insecure attachment dynamics, people can struggle with like either being dismissive towards their partner, or they struggle with like being direct. They assume that if they're direct, they won't get their needs met. And so then they state their needs in really indirect ways, or they act in indirect ways, hoping to get their needs met that way. So, how do you use healthy communication in your relationship to ensure that both you and your partner are on the same page?
We had a lot of important conversations early on in our relationship. And I think because this is an area that I've always been fascinated by growing up learning, there'll be certain tools that I want to talk about early on with people, even in friendships. You might guess love languages is one of them, but also other tools like, and through you, Kaylee, I've been learning about attachment styles, so that's another thing to help us process each other and understand each other. The disc personality tool, there is the Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. So it's almost like I'm not going to sit there and have a partner go through all these tests at one time, but I
Right.
will start with love languages, and I think that that in and of itself is such a powerful tool. And then also expressing my interest in this gives me a little bit of a segue into asking more questions and getting to know them. But I think the more we can find out about each other and understand, which means the other person has to be willing to do this. I have also met on a rare occasion a person who's a little bit resistant to doing them, but most of the time people are more than happy to do or discuss these kinds of personality styles. So that in the beginning, it's just learning, oh, okay, or even just trying to figure out what I think I'm observing in the behavior of this person. And then I don't mean like in bad ways. I just mean, oh, this person tends to communicate like this. This person prefers doing this like this.
Yeah.
To get a sense of who is the person that I'm working with. It's all part of getting to know our partner. So for example, understanding that my partner doesn't do so well with and in a work environment with lots of strict rules. He does need a lot of freedom.
Hmm.
So there's more of a rebel nature in the Four Tendencies when it comes to that. And that's definitely not me, right? I have a very different way of handling inner and outer expectations. So just knowing that, okay, so if there's a lot of structure and a lot of constraints, that's not the place where he's going to produce his best work or his most creative work. Like he almost needs
Yeah.
to be left alone to do his thing to deliver this great thing at the end
Yeah.
versus other people who really need the structure and the rules laid out very clearly to know how to get started. Otherwise, it's just confusing. So, figuring out, or a person who's a questioner, another tendency, like who is going to ask a ton of questions. So, just figuring those little things out and having honest conversations with each other has been very helpful for us, and he has been willing to have those conversations. I mean, this doesn't happen in a month or even in a few months. Like this is over time, and then the next level and the next level and the next level. But
Yeah.
there's something, and I don't really know how to verbalize this. It's more of a feeling, but I just I know that he has my back no matter what my personality style or tendency or mood is,
Yeah.
because he's proven that, right? He has proven that. So letting the evidence speak for itself and allowing time for that to happen is what allows a lot of healthy communication and safety between us. And they all feed into each other. So the more we communicate, the safer I feel. The safer I feel, the more we communicate, the
Yeah.
more we love each other. Then we also experience moments of joy. Just yesterday, we were having a conversation about the need to experience a little bit more joy because things are very heavy right now. For and it can just be heavy in terms of busyness, and it's holiday season, and we're doing this over here, this over here, this over here, which is all great. Like, we're extroverts and we love all of those things, but it can be a little bit stressful to navigate all of the different obligations and locations and balancing that with time.
Absolutely.
I learned one other key difference between us, and that's with quality time. So we're both quality time people, but my quality time with him counts as quality time even if we're with other people. But for him, it doesn't count as our quality time when it's with
Mm.
others. He needs
Yeah.
a lot more quality time alone in the couple. So
Yeah.
that's all part of something that I learned studying communication, is even that difference is important. So I've learned, okay, if we've got quality time with people scheduled, there also needs to be breaks in between, not because he's an introvert, but
Hmm.
because he needs a lot of quality time, just the two of us, to
Ah,
feel
okay.
like he's getting quality time. So
Right.
even
So
just understanding those slight differences is helpful to our healthy communication.
yeah, great. I understand. Yeah, so really knowing this thing about your partner, like it's like you have the manual or the guidebook for your partner and he has the same for you. You know these things about each other and that helps you to be on the same page and to communicate well because you know that you need to make sure that you're spending enough quality time with just him, not going out in groups or whatever, like that he needs that one-on-one. So that's really valuable for you to know. And it sounds like what you're speaking to is built up trust over time, which is created when we follow through. For you, it's like actions speak louder than words. And so you having the experience of being met over and over and over of him following through or whatever it is, like that helps you develop a sense of trust, a sense that you can relax into kind of the relational sphere and communicate better. And the more you communicate, the more, trust there is, and the more trust there is, the more you communicate. So it ends up being this happy, like upward spiral, right?
Yes. Yeah. And for
Yeah.
him, that's 100% true. For him, actions speak louder than words. And in his history, he has been in situations of infidelity and being lied to. So for him,
Yeah.
words mean nothing. Anybody can say anything. And so the fact that for him, the things that I say are backed up by the things that I do, that's what has built trust with him over time, is that the actions are there. For me, what's building the trust is that the words match the actions, because they're both valuable to me, right? The
Yes.
words are not insignificant or less valuable. They're highly valuable to me, but I see that they're a match. So there's a congruence. What he says equals what he does, which is a matter of integrity as well. And for myself also. So we are building that sense of trust because those things are there, but again, slightly different because we're different people with different experiences and different things to be aware of to help each other move forward. And he was always honest from the very beginning, and that meant a lot to me, to be trusted.
Yes. Yeah, honesty is such a foundational quality, right, in relationship that we can be honest with each other in a partnership, and that helps promote that feeling of trust and safety. And of course, I mean, anything like infidelity is going to cause kind of ripple effects. So just knowing that we can trust our partner is very important.
Yeah. But I do
And not,
think that
yeah.
I do think, Kaylee, that trust is earned. So
Mhm.
I know this is a bit of a generalization, but I think in general women are more open to talking about heart matters more quickly and more freely.
Hmm.
And sometimes we might confuse that with if I reveal something, the relationship might start to build trust faster or
Hmm.
but it's just something that takes time and I do think that we need to see the evidence and it's something that should be
Yes.
trickled in versus opening up the floodgates.
Very
Like,
good point.
okay, I shared this bit that I'm comfortable and that's been held in trust. This action met these words, follow through was there. I can now take it to another level because especially if people have been hurt. And so I'm looking at it from my partner's perspective, who's been hurt in the past.
Yeah.
And I think that I wanted to make sure we did things incrementally and slowly so that he could have a more solid foundation with me and see the evidence rather than wondering if the other shoe is going to fall off soon because they've questioned because they've trusted before and they're good people who've trusted before and now they're waiting to see. So I my job I think in the beginning is helping him to wait for the evidence while I'm also waiting for
Yeah.
evidence,
Yeah.
like let's just do this one step at a time so that we make sure that we are building a solid trust foundation and
Hmm.
not and not a fake one or an uncertain one.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Tatiana, and speaks to that the question that people sometimes have of, well, aren't secure relationships boring? Because they're used to these dramatic highs and lows, especially in the beginning of relationships. If there's something like love bombing, or if there's, some sort of like huge display of affection, and sometimes it can be artificial attraction or artificial opening up, like too much closeness too fast, which closeness quickly can be fine, but we just have to distinguish like is it real or is it a means by which to kind of create this forced intimacy with someone very quickly because that can tend to go along with certain types of personalities. And so that can be a very helpful way to distinguish, just to be mindful for ourselves
Mhm.
of when we slow down and are prudent and are thoughtful about what we share and how much we share, that we're getting to know someone over time and we're slowly building trust.
Yes, and a
And
person who truly cares about you isn't going to rush you.
that's
That's
a really important point. Yeah.
it just brought me back to a person who I think was a good person. We were in a dating situation. I think it was the second date, and the first date went well. The second date went to hell in a handbasket quickly, which I was
Yeah.
glad
Yeah.
for because at least I knew. But
Yeah.
one of the things that happened is that there was a situation that had happened with a family member at the time, and this was a second date. I don't know or trust this person, but he kept insisting that he wanted to know what happened, and I said no and changed the subject. But he kept pushing, and it
Yeah.
almost felt like he wanted to force a connection by me revealing something personal. But
Mm,
and my response was like, no, this is a one-off situation that's happening with a family member. I don't want this to be the first impression that you get of this family member. So, it's a simple matter that will be resolved. I would like to keep it private, but
mhm.
it felt like that was bothersome to that person, and it was one of those indicators to me. I was like, this is not feeling good.
Yeah.
And that coupled with a couple of other things just let me know like this is not someone to pursue.
Yeah. And it's
Paying
great.
attention
Like
to
you
those
had that,
signals.
yeah, you had that awareness for yourself that they were boundary pushing, asking you to reveal something you weren't comfortable revealing. It's great that happened on the second date and that happened so early for you to know to avoid that whole situation for yourself. So, yeah, sometimes these things are blessings in disguise, I guess. So, what would you, speaking of relationships that might not be so healthy for us to get into, what would you say to someone who got out of a relationship that didn't go well and that they were tempted to get back into?
Well, I have been in that situation. It's difficult. I mean, I feel like for myself, I had to go through this to really get to the place of fully letting go, but I did accept a person back in my life that wasn't right. So, and I guess because the feelings were still there for me. there were still feelings, there was still hope. And then once it didn't go well with the second round, I knew. Even when that person wanted to come back into my life, at that point I said no. So it's hard to give advice because looking back, I wish I wish I hadn't have done it, but I felt like I had to do it to get to where I am now. So it's one of those things in life where there is no turning back. But sure, do I wish that you don't make the same mistakes that I do? If you're listening to this and you're finding yourself in the situation, of course, I hope that you don't ever have to go through that heartache and pain. But there were signals there that I didn't pay attention to, that I chose to ignore because I was looking to fulfill the wrong need at the time. And this was in that time period, 2 years following my divorce, where I was in a few relationships that were unhealthy for me. And ultimately I realized, I'm like, what am I doing here? None of these situations are right. They're not healthy. They're not good. I feel like crap about all of them. This has to end. I need to figure some things out. So I had to go through that journey to get to a place of wanting and being willing to work more on the core issues. But part of me feels like if I had trusted my instincts in all of those relationships, I would have suffered a lot less because the signals were there. I chose to ignore them.
Yeah. So the lesson or the words of wisdom that you might give to somebody, it sounds like would be something like trust your instincts, trust your gut. Yeah.
And confirm it with people who have always had your back, people who've always loved you, who've always been there for you, who could tell you, do you see any flags here that I'm ignoring? Because I did have a friend. I remember I was on a date with this person and my friend called me, texted me and says, "Where are you? You know, I just want to make sure that you didn't decide to spend time with this person." And, I ignored that.
Oh,
My
wow.
friend's trying to give me a heads up because I told her I didn't think this was right.
Yeah.
But I think at the time I was just trying to get rid of the loneliness. And this
Exactly.
was a person who was willing to pay attention to me, even though
Yeah.
there were things and that's why I think the evidence and the behavior was so important to me this time around. I spent all those years alone and then looking now for the evidence. And this is something that I saw in my current partner is like, it was always backed up with the action and the integrity really was there. Whereas with this other person, there were things that just felt off. There was distrust. I wasn't sure. It was shaky ground. So paying more attention to that, I think, would have certainly saved me quite a bit of trouble.
Yeah, so good to recognize. And sometimes it's like we just have to go through those lessons for ourselves, but it's a good reminder for people that if you listen to your instincts, you listen to your intuition, especially for, some people, some groups of people out there who are told to ignore that for themselves. I'm thinking of women, but I'm sure there's other groups where people are just told to ignore your intuition. It's really valuable to pay attention to that and to notice that, especially somatically, like what our bodies are feeling about situations can be very valuable information. So, one
100%.
last question for you, Tatiana. This has been so valuable. What would you say to someone who feels frustrated with relationships and who wants to build a healthy, loving relationship?
I would say I understand the frustration, especially if you've been waiting and waiting and waiting. My wait was about 12 years.
Yeah.
From the time I got divorced to the time of me meeting my person I'm in my current relationship with. I think it was probably more than 12 years in between that, but let's just go with more than a decade.
Yeah.
And I know how lonely that can feel, but you have to remember that the richness of life, the richness of relationships is not only in romantic partnerships. Yes, that was a desire of my heart. Yes, I prayed for it every day. But I also made sure to acknowledge the beautiful relationships I did have, such as being in the best relationship that I've ever been in with both of my parents, and building and pouring into that. I also, in that crazy life plot twist, I have an 11-year-old sister. Poured a lot of myself into that relationship as well, which is just so incredibly unique. My nieces and nephews, I have a total of 4, pouring into those. My at my church, so in your place of worship, you can find friendships there. And also, I did feel like I was making a difference in other areas of life. So working with college students, teaching college students. I also did some things where I was volunteering with high schoolers, a creative leadership program. So I was, even though I knew, yes, this is missing, yes, the romantic part is missing, did it suck around the holidays when everybody's coupled up and all that?
Yeah.
It did. It did. And you just got to say, like, this is going to be tough, but what would I rather do? Be home alone than out with my friends or with my family? So I think it's the best thing you can do is to pour into and acknowledge other relationships. Maybe there are people who have their romantic partner, but they don't have their mom anymore. Like they would do anything to get a little more time with their mom. So maybe you might be thankful that you have that. And even if you don't have a great relationship with a parent, hopefully there's some way that you feel fulfillment, because it's not, life isn't only about our romantic partnerships. There's so much more to it as well. And I felt whole and fulfilled as a human being, even by myself. And that took some work. That took a lot of unraveling and figure things out. But I do believe that the best thing you can do is stand strong in yourself. Love yourself, who you are, what you stand for, and what you contribute to the world, independently of being in a relationship, and doing everything that you can to be healthy and strong, because it's going to help you no matter what. And then to be patient. I mean, I had no idea how long I would have to wait. But if I knew back then that I would have a 12-year wait to meet the person that I met, I would say, okay, this is worth it. I will wait 12 years so I can have what I have now. But
Wow.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
we don't get to know, but it was worth the wait for me.
Those are beautiful words of encouragement that I'm sure a lot of people need to hear. And yeah, Tatiana is right. Like there are lots of ways to get love in the world and lots of warm, amazing connections we can have, even if we're not, in a partnership. And there's also ways that we can develop our own interests and really pour love into ourselves in a lot of ways that will not only, ignite our passions and help us create amazing things in the world, but also draw that relationship that we're wanting to us. And so one message that I'd like to leave you with is that love is possible and that we can go through a lot in our lives and still create amazing, abundant, beautiful relationships. And so, Tatiana, this has just been such a pleasure. It's been so amazing having this conversation. And I know that people are going to love this. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is also just to show people like, hey, there are secure folks out here. This is, kind of what they're like. And if you want to know more about Tatiana, she works with adjunct professors and she has an adjunct professor academy that she's in the process of creating. Is that right?
That's right, Kaylee. Yes.
Yeah,
And
super exciting.
speaking of fulfillment in other areas too, like this is something that does fill my heart. I love teaching college students, and students respond very, very well to an interactive learning environment, a warm environment where we build a sense of community and belonging and fun, even though there's a lot of hard work in public speaking, right? Public speaking is not easy, but being able to build that, I decided I do want to be able to share that with other educators, adjunct professors specifically, because that's what I am, to help them create these kind of awesome classroom experiences for their students as well. So that's what my YouTube channel is focusing on, and you'll find a lot of communication and public speaking tips that I've done there before as well, since that's my area of expertise. But I am working on this Adjunct Professor Academy to do some live training, some live workshops to build on active learning strategies in the classroom and help professors get their content ready for the following semester. So, yep, that will be coming down the pike.
It's very exciting. I'm very excited to see that come out, and just another resource for all you out there who are looking to have more secure in your life. This is someone who is bringing that into her works in the world, which is amazing. So, well, thank you so much, Tatiana. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we will see each other around soon, and look forward to the next conversation with you.
Absolutely. Sending everybody lots of love.
If you got something out of watching this, please hit the like button and subscribe button to get more useful content. Your support helps me reach more people. And if you know someone who would like this message, you can also click share to let them know. This is Kaylee Larkin, wishing you a beautiful relational journey.